I decided to make this video because I got an email from someone asking how I design my thumbnails, and I started answering it, but then I realized that I was basically writing a book on how to do thumbnails. So I sent that email, but I had written so much in it that I just decided to turn it into a video so that hopefully it could help more than just that one person. So I personally really like thumbnails that are colorful and like collagey and scrapbooky. None of these are real words, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. Those are the thumbnails that draw me in the most for other people's videos, and so those are also the thumbnails that I like to design for my own videos. So I'm going to take you through basically every technique that I use for designing thumbnails because the process is more or less the same every time. So let's head over to the computer. Okay, so the first thing I do is I open up a Photoshop file, and when I create it, I use the film and video preset because then it creates it in a 1920 by 1080 pixel size, and that's exactly the size that thumbnails and videos on YouTube usually are. So usually I start by making the background a certain color, and usually I either use the mint green or the bright yellow color that I use for the Bliss bead normally. I honestly use those colors so much that I could recite the hex codes for them in my sleep. Just in case you're wondering, the mint green is BEEOC5 and then the yellow is FFFA62. So I use those two colors, but then also I have used blue and orange just to add some variety. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep those though, because I feel like if I want to stay more on brand, I should just stick to the mint and yellow, but we'll see, I don't know. So to decide which color I want to use, I just look at which videos I've uploaded recently, and I try to make sure that I don't use the color I last used. I don't want to go like mint, yellow, blue, orange, mint, yellow, blue, orange, but I just want to have like a mix. So in this video, I think I'm going to try to recreate the thumbnail that I made for my Korean video. So for that one, I use the yellow. I just use the paint bucket tool and I fill the background with the yellow color. Next, I usually have one main photo that I use for the thumbnail. So I either get that photo by screenshotting a freeze frame from the video, or while I'm filming, I use my camera to take a separate photo that I know I'll use specifically for the thumbnail. I definitely prefer to do that because when you screenshot, the quality is just no. But yeah, then I like to open up that photo in Lightroom and edit it. And this is already edited, but I'm just gonna pretend that I'm doing stuff to it. Okay, and then once I'm done, I go to File, Export, and then I go back to Photoshop and I open it up as a separate file. I just do Control-A to select it all, Control-C, Control-V, and paste it into my Photoshop document. Now, usually if you're taking a photo with your DSLR, it's probably gonna end up being really big just because 1920 by 1080 is not a very big file size. So all you have to do is just shrink it down so that it fits. Okay, so then I'm thinking this could use another photo. So I go and I actually open up the full video. This is back before I cut my hair. I just kind of scroll through this video and I look for shots that I took that I could possibly use in my thumbnail. So I really like this overhead shot of my notebook. I think that would look cute. So I just find a frame to stop it on, and then on a Mac, you do Command Shift and the number 4 in order to take a screenshot of just part of your screen. I drag it to select the entire frame of the screen. So I go back to Photoshop, I open up the screenshot. Now I might edit this a little bit. It looks a little overly pink, but honestly I think it's fine, so I'm just gonna leave it like this. But I do want to make it a little snazzier, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a cutout of it. That's something I do a lot in my thumbnails, and what I use is this Hyun 580 graphics tablet. I think that's how you pronounce it, I'm not sure. I just plug it into my computer using a USB, and then there's this special pen, and then you just use it as your mouse. Oh my god. So I select the layer that has the notebook image on top of it, and then I use the lasso tool. So then you just go around the entire notebook. Okay, I'm sitting in a very uncomfortable position, so this is why it's not going well. Almost. Okay, there. And once I have it lassoed, I usually go to Select, Modify, and then Smooth, which basically just like smooths out the rough edges of your selection, and usually I use a radius of about 10 pixels. So then once I'm happy with my selection, I use Command-Shift-I to invert the selection and then delete everything that's outside of it. So now I have this cutout image that I can move around, and I think I'm just gonna place it like near the bottom here. Alright, next it's time for some text. So usually for my thumbnails, I don't want to do the whole video title because that's just really long, so I choose 2 or 3 words that kind of best represent it. What I've been doing recently is just doing like a white rectangle with a shadow behind it and then the text on top of it, and I'll show you how I do that even though it's pretty simple. So I use the rectangle tool and I draw a rectangle. Wow, knowledge. Then I duplicate it and I use the color overlay setting on the duplicated one, and I just set it to kind of a light gray color. I move that layer behind the original rectangle and I just use the arrow keys to kind of move it out of place a little bit so that it looks like a shadow. Once I've got that set, then I use the text tool and I just draw a text box and I'll type learning and I'll make the text black because that's just the style that I've been using and I want to keep it consistent. So then I like to link those layers so that when I move them, they all move together. And then since I also want to incorporate the word Korean, I'm just going to duplicate that whole set of layers, move it to the bottom a little bit, and then type Korean on the second one. Another way that I like to incorporate text into thumbnails is by using some handwriting. So for that, I again use my graphics tablet and I select a brush that has a pressure sensitivity, and I'll quickly show you how to do that. So you select your brush tool, you go to the menu where you have some more control over how the brush works, you click Shape Dynamics, and then you select pen pressure for the control. But so basically then you just have this brush that is sensitive to how hard you're pressing on the tablet. So if I wanted to use that on this thumbnail, I might do something like this. Sometimes I kind of want to make it look like I wrote it in a pencil, so then I use a tool that has kind of like a grainy texture to the brush and it doesn't have any pressure sensitivity, and so then I might just write something like this. Yeah, it looks pretty bad, but that's the general idea of it. All right, another type of text that I like to do is text that has a shadow underneath it. So this is very similar to how I showed you I create the box shadows. So let's say I wrote Korean in these big black letters, and then to create a shadow, I would duplicate the text layer, move it underneath the original layer, and then use the color overlay tool to make it, let's make it a bright red. And then I use the arrow keys to kind of nudge it away from the original text, and then it looks like a shadow. A similar effect that I like to do is creating an overlay that is an outline. For this technique, I again duplicate the layer that says Korean, and then I go not to the color overlay tool, but to the tool that is called stroke. So I just pick a color, whatever color I want the outline to be. I'll just make it like a royal blue for our purposes, and I'll make it maybe 5-ish pixels. Okay, so I'll show you what this looks like. Basically, it's a copy of the same black text just outlined in blue, but I don't want this copy to have the black inside of it. So I go over to my layers panel and I set the fill to 0%, and now it's empty. So what I like to do with that is either just like place it on top or place it behind. So it's not quite a shadow effect, but it's something similar, and I like the way that it looks. All right, moving on before my computer dies on me. The last thing I like to add is some decoration. So sometimes I add like some arrows or some flourishes or things like that. And for that, again, I just use the brush that is pressure sensitive, and I create a new layer and I just draw stuff, basically. I might do like a black arrow connecting the notebooks. I might use a white brush to add some flourishes around my notebook. Just little things like that I think add a nice touch. Something that I've recently started doing is doodling all over my backgrounds. So for one video, I used a background that was just full of plus signs. For this Korean video, I actually used a background that was completely filled up with Hangul, which is Korean writing. So that took a little bit longer than backgrounds usually take, and I don't want to redo that. So I'm just going to do a simple plus sign background. So then what I would do is I would create a new layer and I just draw a bunch of plus signs. Yeah, this looks terrible. I'm sorry. Normally I would put more like time and effort into this, and then I would move that layer behind the image elements but in front of the yellow layer and just kind of resize it. Sometimes I change the opacity of the layer so that it's not too distracting. So yeah, I just think it's an easy way to make it a little bit more interesting. Another little decoration that I like to add sometimes is again using that shadow technique but using it on images. So for this thumbnail, I did an outline of my notebook. So I might go to my notebook layer, duplicate that layer, and then use that color overlay tool again to give it a mint color. So then I move that behind the original image and I use the arrow keys to move it out of the way a little bit, and then that just kind of makes it stand out a little bit more. And yeah, that's basically it. I don't use a lot of techniques. I just kind of keep reusing the same ones and combining them in different ways. In terms of other people's thumbnails, someone who I really admire for their thumbnails is Jen Im. Her thumbnails also often have that colorful collage-y quality, and I don't know, they just really draw me in. I don't know if everyone likes those types of thumbnails, but I love them. Also Joan Kim, her more recent thumbnails are more like minimalistic, but I really like the ones that she made like a few months ago, where she would just combine all these different images and colors and fonts. Basically, you just have to find what you like. So you have to experiment with different styles and find what you like the best, and then try to stick with it, because it really helps if your thumbnails look cohesive. Then people kind of learn how to recognize your videos. So hopefully this video gave you some ideas for techniques that you can try when creating your own thumbnails. Let me know if there's anything else that you see in my thumbnails that you want to learn how to do. It's all pretty simple, honestly. Like, I don't have any crazy these secret techniques, but hopefully you find it helpful anyways. So yeah, hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week. Bye!